Greetings, everyone. This is Trey. I'm here on this 8th day of December 2018. I'm here with my new friend Michael, which I recently met on the Unbelievable page on Facebook. And he had some rather striking comments to make about Christians and the way that they thought. And I said, "Are you willing to put your money where your mouth is?" And he said, "Absolutely." And so here we are today. And thank you for joining me, Michael.
Happy to be here, Trent. Thank you. Trey, sorry.
Yeah. So can you, whenever I do these hangouts, I always like to know a little bit about the people who I'm talking with, and maybe a little bit about yourself. I like to, I don't know if you're married or anything like that, or if your job is interesting or anything like that, but mostly I want to know about your spiritual background, if you had any religious background at all in your life, if you could just give a few snippets there.
Yeah. So Christian whole life. Parents are, really devout Christians. So my whole family, essentially, both sides, and we're like in the what would you call it? The Protestant, charismatic, Pentecostal, that flavor. But my mom's side definitely more mystic, not as dogmatic. They're not gonna. There's no shaming going on with people that leave or have issues. It's not like the Jehovah's Witnesses or anything.
Sure.
But I know that this mainstream Christianity, probably a denomination you belong to, is on a whole nother page on a lot of things, and it's been not like a wake-up call, or just kind of an interesting perspective, the fact that I just never knew that. And like what I associate with Christianity is a particular niche Christianity. So I recognize that, obviously I can be too broad and generalize and all that. I left the faith about 3 years ago. Started thinking more universalist, didn't understand why atonement had to be agreed upon. Like, why would I have to believe? What's the virtue of faith in that whole equation? And that, those kinds of questions just kept creeping up, and having relationships in life and meeting Muslims, meeting Mormons, making friends with Buddhists, and, just realizing that, essentially we're all people, and there's no way God is that petty. Is he really just trying to get us to be good theology students, or, does he like us?
Okay. Well, that's helpful. So you came from a more of a Pentecostal, charismatic background. Is it like a non-denominational thing, or is there some kind of a person because see, I got saved in the charismatic movement, so I'm a little familiar with that world.
Word of Faith, is that a denomination? Word of
gosh,
Faith?
Yeah, that's really out there. Like Kenneth Copeland, Kenneth Hagin, and Creflo Dollar, those kind of guys. Okay, well, that's interesting. I have a little bit of exposure to that as well, and I would probably agree with your assessment on that expression of Christianity. I think it has very little in common with the biblical historic Christian faith. I think it has more in common with Eastern mysticism, syncretized with Christianity, kind of like like your Kenneth, I can't remember if it was Copeland or Hagin said, words are, or faith is a force, words are containers of the force, and through the force of faith you can create your own reality.
It's a lot like the name it, claim it,
yes, that's what it
is. New age stuff. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, same thing. And so what they do is they take faith. Faith is not meant to be an ontology of some kind of force that you have, kind of like the force of the Star Wars or something. It rather is just simply a trust that you have in anything really than what you have. And so they completely redefine faith and what it is. And so it's a very cultic movement. I don't think it's an adequate expression of Christianity. But I was
although footnote on that one, I happen to think it probably is closer to original Christianity.
Yeah, no, it's not. That's the whole thing. It's not even close to the same thing. There's a historic. Here's one thing, Michael.
Well, we can debate that. I would definitely like to debate that.
Okay, so you think that faith is not trusting God, but it's rather a tool that we wield to create reality.
Tool that we wield to create reality. Well, I definitely think that you're right. That it's an amalgamation of New Age stuff.
Okay, but you just said a minute ago it's historic Christianity.
Yeah. What I mean is the expression, the speaking in tongues, and everyone, thinking that they're divine conduits of some power. I mean, Paul talks about the powers that we have, and or essentially what does he say? You would know. You know what he says specifically, and there's also those like weird esoteric kind of pass by comments that you don't realize are kind of indicators of like women should cover their heads because the angels will confuse them, and it's like that's a strange, where does that come from? And so you see little bits and pieces of things crop up that go like this was a mystery religion, in keeping with the surrounding environment. I mean, it was syncretism with Hellenistic ideas, and I feel like that's too hard to deny. There's too many parallels.
Okay, so you say that basically Christianity is something that is that basically is made up and that is used as an amalgamation of the pagan ritualistic religions that were at the first century Palestinian area.
Made up? What do you mean by made up?
Well, it's not true.
Well, to the people that believe in it sure is.
Well, is gravity true to you?
See, gravity is still debated, isn't it? No, okay, let me think.
Well, if you don't believe in gravity, can you walk off your roof?
Well, just because I don't understand how gravity works, or there's there's debates about, what is it Einsteinian or is it Newton? It seems like large scale objects operate more like Newton, and then subatomic stuff. Or wait,
I'm not debating the details of how gravity works. I'm saying, does gravity affect you, whether you believe it or not?
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. So, in the same sense, if you have a religious conviction, does your desire or your love for that religious conviction make it any more true or false?
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's a long conversation, because I think that even if you don't know exactly what you're tapping into, like let's say you're wrong about the facts, as far as what you're doing psychologically, but yet you believe it sincerely, thus, no, that has nothing to do with it. But yeah, the fact that you believe it sincerely, reinforces, you can have a really good tradition where people have been thinking about ideas and mulling it over. And like, look at the Jewish tradition, man. They were Calvinists in a sense. They were the, precursors. When the rabbis are going back and forth about, what does it mean to be whatever predestined, I think it's ordained, right? You can tell that they're hinting or they're nudging towards, what would become the Reformation, right? Am I doing this right? I'm trying to remember this stuff.
No, but but we're just kind of talking about something that's not pertinent to what we're saying. I'm trying to say that somebody's belief in a religious conviction has nothing to do with the veracity of it. In other words, sure, either it's true or it's not. What we're doing is there's an objective reality outside of us. What you're buying into is some Kantian philosophy, and you don't even know it through Enlightenment.
Well, I like Kant. Yeah, I actually know a little about him.
Okay, well, Immanuel Kant basically came up with this concept called the noumenal realm. And he basically said there are some things that we cannot experience with our senses, therefore, we just have to take them by faith. And he put three entities within that category. He put in the essence of things. We can't really see the essence of anything. Every time we get a stronger microscope, we keep looking and looking, and we peel the onion more, yet we still never are able to perceive the actual essence of things. We're also not able to experience our own essence, our own personhood. It's not something that you can experience necessarily. And then thirdly, he said you cannot experience God with the senses. Therefore, these three things, that you must take them by faith. And so what he did is by separating reality from the phenomenal realm, which would be that which you can experience with the senses, and the noumenal realm, which is the spiritual sense, he made this dichotomy between reality and what you're doing right now. I don't know if you realized it a minute ago. You took that whole idea that religion is a part of the noumena. It's a part of this realm that we can't experience, and so we just accept it. And it almost has this attitude like, just because I believe it really good or really strongly, therefore it's kind of real for me. But not really. I mean, it's kind of in this purgatory of reality.
That's the epistemology, metaphysics dichotomy you were discussing, right?
Yes. Well, the emphasis for us now is on epistemology.
Meaning, how do we know what we know?
Yes. That's right. Okay. And metaphysics is the study of ultimate reality. What is that which unifies all the diversity of reality? And so,
wait. Well, hold on. What was your definition of metaphysics?
It's the quest for that which is the ultimate reality, that which ultimately unifies all diversity. Because we have all these bits and matter together, and how does it all cohere into one? How does it all make sense? How does it all work together? How do you explain it? And Plato had the idea of the theory of ideas and
ideals,
and Aristotle was the theory of substance, and they disagreed on both metaphysics and epistemology, but they both were very, very helpful in their thinking and in their ideology. I don't know if you know this, but St. Augustine was the great synthesizer of Christianity and Platonism, and Aquinas was the synthesizer of Aristotelianism and Christianity. They're both actually very helpful to the Christian faith in the way.
Yeah. And I see the what do you call them? Platonic forms, and I see that definitely in the Christian tradition. Even I see it early. I see it real early. I see it. Look at Paul. When Paul's talking about, where do I want to go with this? Paul says there's a glory for the stars, there's a glory for the sun, there's a glory for this and that, yada yada.
Right.
He's talking Neoplatonism, is he not? I mean, you see it in Hebrews. Hebrews says there's copies of everything.
In the heavenlies, that the shadow was the for example, the whole idea of ceremonial law is a shadow of the substance of Christ, and these things which we see here are a shadow of the perfection of heaven. It wasn't that Christianity was copying up of Plato. It's that Plato was properly exegeting reality. That's why I say he's helpful. It used to be said that theology is the queen of the sciences and philosophy is her handmaiden. And many people today don't like that, and they want to separate the Bible from philosophical history. And I don't. I think that if people are going to deny the influence that the thought of, say, for example, Plato and Aristotle had on Christianity, I think they're just denying the reality of it. And I don't think that Plato and Aristotle are defining Christianity, but they can help us as Christians because of natural theology, because they can think God's thoughts after him, even if they don't acknowledge him. We are able to understand certain principles about the preambles of the faith through nature, because that's what God has said. And that's what Paul says in Romans 1 and Romans 2. Everybody knows these things.
I feel like maybe you're not realizing, you're not, looking at the proper Sitzenleben, right? You're not thinking of the original context. You're looking at like the way obviously you're knowledgeable, right? You've looked at this history of Christianity. You see what's like the philosophical underpinnings that just happen to cohere with some Platonic ideas. And you're saying those Platonic ideas help us because...
the Platonic ideas don't really... All right, the big question is the one and the many. What is the arche, the ultimate reality? And how do we get diversity out of the unity? How do you unify the diversity that we see? And so Plato's idea was trying to solve that. He said, Well, you have the theory of the ideals in this super temporal realm that is eternal, and everything that we see here is an imperfect instantiation of it here on the earth of what it is. So I can remember back, but Aristotle criticized him, and he said, Plato, you're not really solving the problem of the one and the many, because you're just moving the unity up to a spiritual level, but there's still a diversity of things in this super temporal realm. And so what Augustine did, well, Christianity came and actually, because Augustine was a Neoplatonist before he became a Christian, those things which you can say is those ideals in the realm of the ideals, they're just ideas in the mind of God. And then
why in the mind of God though? Why in the mind of God?
Because God is a unity that gives being to all diversity.
So I get that, and so that's a very logical synthesis. But why? I mean, what if we just need points on a on a graph? We need reference points. What if we just need objective things to talk? What if the logic that we perceive as being like universal or properly basic to the universe, and you're looking for something that like grounds that, what if that's just the way our brains work? And so I think to extend, what we see in our brains, when we're thinking about things, we think this way. There must be ideal forms of ideas. There must be a perfect goodness, or else how could we have gradients thereof? There must be and then you get into
Thomas's fourth way.
Then you get into privation and this idea that everything Anyway, you see where I'm going with this. I'm looking at it as it's a nice synthesis, but aren't we taking some things for granted?
Okay. Well, tell me this, Michael. How do you justify your existence?
Oh, you are a Calvinist.
Yes, I am.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know that's probably rude.
No, that's true.
Okay, yeah, because like you guys do this, man. Like, why? It's the trump card the Calvinists try to pull with everything, man. Did you see that debate?
No, I'm not a presupposition. Are you equating presuppositionalism with, that wasn't a presuppositional question?
Okay, there's a guy, you actually posted a video from him with Matt Dillahunty on your page, and that guy did a debate with Matt Dillahunty that was awful. It reminded me of I couldn't even describe
Is it Matt Slick? I don't even remember I don't remember the post. Is it Matt Slick?
No, it's Sid or Cy.
Oh, Cy Ten Bruggencate. Oh, okay. Yeah, Cy is a presuppositionalist. I'm not like him. I don't believe the same way. I mean, he's Christian. I mean, he's a brother in Christ, but I think that he is very strongly erroneous in his epistemology, and
strongly erroneous. Like you need to do more than just
assert God.
Yeah,
you can demonstrate it.
Yeah, I like that. That's nice. Okay, so you're not a presuppositionalist. What does that mean exactly?
Presuppositionalism means that you must presuppose God at the beginning of your inquiry. And my problem I have with that is that how do you presuppose that which you don't know? They want to say the sensus divinitatis, or the sense, we all have this sense of God, the image of God, is in our being. And so that we know God, we know the triune God of Scripture without even having anything revealed to us. And the problem with that is that they conflate natural revelation and special revelation. It's pretty sloppy. It came up in the early 19th century. A guy named Cornelius Van Til came up with presuppositionalism. And to me, it's an ahistorical, unbiblical, and unworkable perspective, because it conflates epistemology with metaphysics. In other words, we must have God in order to make sense of anything. That's a metaphysical claim. How we know that is a completely different question, and they say it's the same thing. Everybody just knows God. Everybody knows the God of Christianity. You don't need to preach the Bible necessarily to them. They just know the God of Christianity exists, and it's not true. Everybody knows there's a creator, and we know that through creation. Everybody knows there's a creator who is moral. We all have a moral law within us. We know that we shouldn't be murdering each other.
How's that not presuppositional?
No, that's not. That's classical. Because you get that by way of reflection. In other words, I know there's a creator. How? I look at creation, and my conclusion is there is a God. All right.
Creation. Create the outside world we observe, the animals
we know
eating
that
each other. And
essentially we know that we're not self-existent. If I'm not self-existent, then there must be something giving me my ontology in order otherwise I would not be. Well,
okay, well,
I learned that by way of discursive thought.
that's our brains, though. That's the way we think. We need reference points. We need objective standards to make sense of things. That doesn't mean that that's the way it is.
Okay, yeah, but that now you're committing the fallacy of parsimony. You're adding an extra layer of confusion where it's not warranted. What is your justification for saying that it could be otherwise?
Have you seen creation?
I know. I see myself.
Okay, well, you
everything else could be a dream. I mean, everything else could not be real. But one thing I do know without doubt is that I exist because I'm asking a question. Okay, so solipsism's off the table, right? Because who wants to do that? Who cares? Well, even no. I mean, if you want to, it doesn't. That makes no difference to my argument because solipsism still all I need is an inquirer.
Yeah, perhaps you're going deeper than I've gone. I guess what I'm getting at is it seems presuppositional because if you look at creation, is what springs forth. You know, do we say intelligent design, or do we say take a second, let's look at what kind of design we have?
No, that's a different argument. That's a teleological argument. I'm arguing an argument for. Thomas had 5 ways. The 5 ways of Thomas's argument, St. Thomas Aquinas, and they're very closely interrelated. But he had an argument from motion, an argument from causality, an argument from contingency, an argument from degree, which you mentioned a little bit ago. If there's such a good thing as goodness, there must be an ultimate, reference. And then fifthly is the argument from teleology, or that there's a purpose, which is what you just. But my main argument is a contingency argument. If there is dependent existence, there must be something that is self-existent in order to give contingent existence its being. Otherwise, the law of non-contradiction explodes.
Why can't that just be like an abstract something we don't understand? Like why?
Okay. Well, then you've conceded the argument.
Conceded the argument?
Well, you said that there's some kind of thing that we don't understand, but we know that it's self-existent, and we concede that it exists. That would be God. We're just arguing over names now.
Well, yeah, no. See, if God is that, we can just say that. Well, the fact that we exist proves there's something beyond just what we perceive, or just what we have. Like we must be here for not some reason, but we are here. Period.
And we're not self-existent.
We're not self-existent.
Which means we're dependent in our existence.
Dependent in our existence. But what are we dependent on? We don't
something, right? And it can't be dependent itself on which we're dependent, because that thing itself would be dependent. You can't have a full realm of potential, actualized potential being existing, because then everything would be potential, which means everything would really be nothing. Because to be potential is not to be.
But how could God have potential if he is the,
He doesn't have any potential. He's pure act. He's pure being.
But couldn't
We're not God.
Couldn't the realm beyond the universe that birthed the universe be that thing?
Yeah, that would be God. If you're saying it's an unchanging volitional person that gives rise to all contingent volitional persons.
Okay, well, hey, I'm gonna null on this for a second, but I just want to point, like, don't you run into problems when you look at the God that's written about in the book? Because in the book, he changes his mind. He's kind of a douche sometimes. Like, the abstract, like the God of philosophy definitely is not the God of the Bible.
Sure it is.
If you believe it, but you know what I mean.
I'm just saying it's the only thing that's coherent that makes any sense. So you want to say that you don't like the God of the Bible. Why? What specifically are you offended by?
Genocide?
Are people inherently valuable?
That's that psi stuff, man. No, dude, like it's bad.
No, that psi does use that. I'll grant you that. That's called a reductio ad absurdum argument. What I do is I assume your position and then I extrapolate it out to the nth degree and show how it's silly.
Are humans valuable? I think so. Other people think so.
Are they objectively valuable? Not that you fantasize it.
I don't care.
If you didn't care, you wouldn't eat.
Didn't care, you wouldn't eat. I guess I could say whatever it is that lets people join together and make communities and societies and try to find kind of a way to make it all work out and not be too horrible for everyone. You know, she looks down on genocide and things like that.
Right. So the fact that you get upset at genocide means that you believe that there's a God who gives value to existence, that they're objectively valuable, right?
Use value to existence, that they're objectively valuable. Hey, I get that contradiction. Like, I get that there's that problem, that epistemological chestnut. So
that I just solved.
But why God? Why, like, just because God? I mean, okay, you're just putting a name on it, right? Like,
well, I'm saying that God has actually revealed himself, and you can look at the Bible, and it's a historically accurate account of what has happened in the past.
So, do you know anything about biblical studies?
A little bit.
So the documentary hypothesis or the fragmentary supplemental hypothesis and all that stuff, totally disregarded it?
Yes, because that's out of Enlightenment, a hermeneutic, a way of, it's called the historical critical method.
There's anachronisms in the Old Testament.
Oh, really? Which ones?
So I think it's Samson. I know I got this wrong on some thread. That is, you know, Samson or Abraham, you know, giving tribute at shrines and things like that. Supposedly after the centralization of the temple, you know, when God gave the Levitical laws. And the Levitical laws, what, Deuteronomy 21, I think. Everything's done at the temple. Why do we have stories about shrines and whatnot coming after supposedly the centralization of temple tribute?
Because when there's a scattering of the people and they're not unified, you see accommodation. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but you see God being gracious to his people and not giving them as they deserve. The whole purpose of the Old Testament is to demonstrate God's holiness, and that's why he seems so harsh, and man's inability to keep that law in order to save himself, which makes way for the Messiah who was promised to come in Genesis 3:15.
You know, that's what Isaiah says, right? And it comes, Paul says it too, right? That's one school of Jewish hagiography. No, whatever it is. That's one Jewish way of looking at it, right? But aren't there other ways? Like, doesn't Amos have like a civil rights bent? And, you know, are they all like, what am I trying to say? Is every person in the Bible on the same page as far as what the law was for?
Well, sure.
Even if that's true, like, yes, they're all on the same page. They're all just saying it different ways. Why would that be evidence? Why would that be evidence of it being true? I guess that's my side coming out, because what does the atheist always do? Oh, show me the evidence. I'm totally happy with conjecture. Like, if we could just come to like a decent conjecture about it. But yeah, if I will just make that point real quick. If there was some kind of council of some priesthood that compiled their stuff laying around, and they said, well, the South has this material, the North has this material. We really want to bring these people together, and we're gonna, you know, cut and paste this together somehow. If that happened in any form, to say that the rationale, or to say that what we see God, or to say that Isaiah's outlook on the law and what it was for is necessarily what God's was, is to not acknowledge what those people in that priesthood might have, maybe they had a bias towards that particular view and they wanted that view. I mean,
yeah, but I think also the whole thing in your interpretation here is to say that God cannot oversee the affairs of man in such that he would guide them in what is true. So you're taking a naturalistic perspective.
Real quick, I want to turn you up, and I want to see. Can you hear me just as good if I turn you up?
Sure. Yeah, I can hear you.
Sometimes I have problems with that. Say again. Say again.
So I was saying you have a perspective that somehow that man is autonomous apart from God, and that somehow he's trying to figure these things out with God without assuming that God, if he wants to communicate with man, can lead and guide men in the way that he wants them to go. In other words, that there's a consistency in his revelation to man. It seems to me that'd be rather trivially true if, in fact, he wants to reveal himself to man. And he could use men, even in their free wills, as such, to in their personalities, in order to have a consistency in his revelation to those people. I don't see why that's a problem.
Well, I do.
Okay, why? Because God can't do that?
Yeah, sure. So God could use people. He could use anyone he wanted, like, right? So Paul is persecuting the Christians and stuff. Who cares if he hand-selected 12 disciples that could supposedly speak in diverse languages at, a whim? I'm going to pick that guy and knock him to the ground and go, he's the right fella to teach the Gentiles.
Well, he doesn't look at Paul and say, ooh, I see something in him that I could use. He's the one that determines Paul. Every blink of your eye is determined by God. You've got this idea about existence, that somehow that we exist in this natural world and God is outside of it thinking, oh, how can I break in? No, God is, every beat of your heart is a gift from him. So it's not like you have this, you're contingent, you're dependent in your existence. Every moment you have is from him. He's not trying to figure out some way that he can trick the devil or trick Michael or something like that. He's working it all from the very beginning as hell. He's not learning anything either. Time is his invention.
How are you not, what's the word? Affirming the consequent. Is that the right one?
Yeah, assuming the very thing that I'm supposed to be asserting. You mean like begging the question. Yeah. So what I do is I build this big edifice, and I construct it in such a way that it's convenient for me to have the end that I desire.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you're pretty. You got a big vocabulary. I try to keep it pretty layman because I used to be a bit of a whatever the word, egocentric person that wanted to, make everyone think I'm smart.
I can assure you, I'm not very smart. I don't have any real formal education. I'm curious about these things, and I enjoy thinking.
Yeah, no, me too. I really appreciate it, but I am kind of losing some of your finer points because I'm missing like what you're saying.
Okay. I forgot what I said.
You just now you said it's like you were explaining what the affirming the consequent thing is. You're saying it's like I built this big edifice.
So I'm saying like I have this whole worldview that I built, and what I've done is I stacked the deck so that all the facts will fall exactly where I want them to, so I can come to God. That's what you're choosing.
No, because I understand that what you're doing is you're synthesizing like the natural implications of epistemology with your beliefs. So you're saying they are one and the same. But you are synthesizing them. So I understand what you're doing. It's not necessarily like you've found something. You just came up with something. It's like, no, you're taking two domains and you're saying like these domains go together.
I'm trying to unify diversity.
Right.
I'm trying to make coherence. I mean, everything, Plato said that the goal of science is the saving of the phenomena of existence. And that's exactly what all of us are doing right now. Michael, the reason you're in this hangout with me right now is because you want to save the phenomenon of existence. You're thinking, this guy has some ideas, I have some ideas. Let's interact with them together, and let's see if we can find those things which cohere reality. Not that we're making reality by what we say, but more so that we're saying, well, let's find out what reality is, and let's
figure it
try
out.
to make sense of it. Yeah, for the purpose of the sanctity of existence. This is if you talk to people who have talked to me before, I'm always harping on this idea of sanctity of existence, and most guys don't really understand it. Not because it's hard to understand, they just never heard it put that way before. But I would say that everything that you do, every society that centers around the idea of the sanctity of existence, and they're all trying to promote salvation. That's why they do what they do. Every law is made so that they can save the phenomena of existence. You're doing science so you can save the phenomena of existence. People do theology to save phenomena of existence. Now, the skeptic...
So how is it not just curiosity? How is it not just passion?
Curiosity is for the sake of existence, right? For happiness, for fulfillment, for life.
Yeah. Okay. So hold on. I got to wrap my head around some of these things you're saying, because you are you got some good shit here. So curiosity is for the sanctity of existence, meaning the sacredness of life, like the fact that we even want to do anything at all,
right,
is proof that we give a shit.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And the fact that we care
presupposes a sanctity of existence, but there's got to be an objective valuer to give value to contingent existence. If there's such a thing as value in this universe, there's got to be a valuer that is a self-existent.
So yeah, I don't think so, because I've thought about this a lot. I don't think so, because we can have measurements of things that are better or worse, right? So if human beings like living in a society that doesn't suck, then they'll come up with systems to mitigate the suckiness, as flawed as they are.
Okay, well, you're committing to Sam Harris fallacy. That's a petitio principii fallacy.
Well, let me finish.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know you weren't finished. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I kind of see what you're saying. Crap.
Well, you're saying we like to do what we can to try to make society as desirable as we can. And
what you're saying specifically is the fact that we even want to do that in the first place is the point.
Yeah, right? You're not going deep enough in your inquiry. You got to ask yourself the question: how did we become determined to value existence? Because we are determined, aren't we, to value existence?
Okay, so all right, I get you now. All right, so you got a cluster of cells over a couple billion years. They form into things that are competing for resources. Why are they competing for resources?
Right.
For the replication of genes.
Right. For a purpose.
That purpose
is the sanctity of existence.
So the genes, let's say, like, okay, I'm going to go with Dawkins style. The genes are the selecting,
the replicating genes. Yeah. DNA replicating. Yeah.
Right. He looks at the bodies, these organisms, as vessels for the replicating genes. Right. So read a great book about sex and what it's about. The Red Queen. Have you read it?
No, I have not heard of it.
Oh, it's great book, because you at least get an idea of like what they're, because they're trying to figure out why sex and how does natural selection, or I guess it's almost teleological. They make it teleological because
they can't do otherwise.
This is a fascinating thing. Well, no, hold on. Genes that are good at replicating themselves will
survive.
We can speak about them as like, in an anthropological way. We could say the genes that want to do such and such. And, it's just a happenstance, or not happenstance. It's just the way it works. If you have every possible scenario, or a really large window of possible scenarios of genes, and the one that wins out will be the ones that are best at doing something. If the thing that they need to do is replicate themselves, then we can talk about them kind of teleologically. But it doesn't.
But it's an illusion. You're channeling the selfish gene right now. I've read that book.
Am I?
I mean, yeah. Richard Dawkins says everything looks like as if it's a purposeful, but it's an illusion. It's not really true.
Well, I mean, okay, so let's talk teleology here.
Okay.
Right. He talks about like, kids think rocks are for bears to scratch their back and clouds are for raining. And this is what kids think, right? We're natural teleologists or whatever. So he's trying to make the argument that, of course, we're going to think there's a thing in the sky, an invisible man in the sky, because look at what, everything has purpose. This is our bias. What was your question again? I just wanted to, I'm doing that a little bit for people that might be watching, just because.
Well,
if they ever do.
I mean, I'm just saying, how do you justify from an even Darwin in the subtitle of his book, On the Origin of Natural Species, or The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Why is preservation a goal, and favored races? What is a favored race? One that survives. He has teleology even in the title of his book, and yet Darwinian evolution has no efficient cause. It has no valuer to it. Therefore, that's why I always say evolution is not unworkable. I think it's laughable. It should be ridiculed. It's one of the most stupid It's a wonderful idea for the 18th, 19th century. It was a wonderful idea, but we're living in 21st century now. We had to move beyond that because, you know, we don't have rats growing spontaneously out of rags anymore, or, you know, fish growing spontaneously out of ponds.
Can we just back up a little bit? You told me that I was channeling the selfish gene when I talked about how things can appear or not appear. They are.
Well, they appear to be, but it's not really true.
But what I'm saying is the ones that win out will be, ironically, those genes that are good at replicating themselves. It's not that they want it, really. It's, you know, they are inanimate amino acids. Okay. But the fact that amino acid chains, but the fact that the ones that are the best at it, the organisms we see replicating themselves today, the individual organisms replicating themselves, is a representation of that, right? It's like it's gene selection written large. So like we, you know, at different levels. So now we're a large, but I know I'm kind of messing this up, but I'm trying to get across this idea that, yes, it seems like the teleological problem exists with talking about natural selection.
Mm-hmm.
And am I kind of getting this right? Am I touching on it?
But even that, you can even overlook all of that. Just, is there one instantiation of value in this universe, namely that you want to have this conversation? Does that exist?
Is there one instantiation of value? There's a lot of instantiations.
All I need is one. All I need is one. Does it exist with a goal? Because goal is a purpose of is a function.
Okay. All right. So Okay. I get you. So what if at the base of it all is just the duality of on or off, kind of like a computer, you know, when you get down to it, it's just a 1 or a 0.
Is on better than off?
No.
Okay, then I want you to stop eating today.
Nah, that doesn't work. That's definitely a fallacy. I'm not sure exactly which one it is.
Is stopping eating an off?
Huh?
If you stop eating, you'll turn your life off, right?
I guess you're saying
off is death, on is life, right? On is better than off.
No, I'm talking about just the abstract concept of on and off.
How do you unify this abstract concept? How are you applying it to the reality in which we live? Because that's what we're discussing.
I'm kind of saying existence, non-existence. That's what I'm getting at.
Right. So existence is better than non-existence. Otherwise, you would stop eating.
Otherwise, you would stop. Yeah. God, what exactly are you doing here? I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I don't take my values from, you know, a theory about the way particle physics works.
Where do you take them from?
Let's see. What do I take them from? Currently, I'm reading a lot and thinking a lot and trying to be a good dad and stuff, you know. Why am I doing that?
For your children?
Why am I doing that? Compulsion, right?
What is compelling you?
Wait, what is compelling me? Good question.
If there is no God, there's no compulsion. There's no compulsion. There's no goal. It's nihilism. That
doesn't make sense. It's weird. It doesn't make sense.
Okay.
I'm not understanding exactly why. Let's say at the base of everything is some abstract concept of existence, non-existence, and so we ended up on this side of it. I'm not saying that scales all the way up to our value system. I'm just saying we're talking about existence, non-existence. You want to get into like why natural selection gave us the instincts we have and why we have them. Like that's an interesting thing. It's not like those things are all. It's not like that, you know.
Is natural selection a being?
Is natural selection a what?
A being? Does it have some kind of ontology you're speaking of? It's like it's a person or something. You said natural selection gave you.
I think it's a phenomenon that we observe.
Okay, so it's really nothing so far as ontological status. It has no being, right?
I mean, it's okay. So it's us trying to figure out how to explain something that happened. So, we're like, natural selection makes sense for this and this reason, and then we go, okay, that theory, that edifice, does it fit the evidence? And of course, the creationists would say, they're just doing the opposite thing. They're trying to make the evidence fit the theory. I disagree. I think the evidence is very, very strong for evolution.
Okay, so how do you have purpose unintentionally? That's what evolution that's why I make fun of it. I ridicule it.
It's totally weird. How do you have anything for no reason? That's weird. I agree. So just because we don't understand it, it's a paradox. So we don't understand it, it's a paradox. Does that mean we should?
No, it's a contradiction. It's not a paradox. It's a contradiction.
Maybe it is.
Paradox is a reconcilable difficulty. A contradiction is you cannot have unintentionality intending intention into existence. It's ridiculous. It violates the law of identity, law of non-contradiction.
I don't get it. Yeah, you got me, man. I don't get why it's necessarily the case that, everything at every level of reality has to be symmetrical or coming out of the thing below it. Like, there's different levels.
It's a principle called ageris sequitur esse. It means that action follows being. So for example, you don't see elephants giving rise to birds. They give rise to elephants. Or rocks don't create philosophical societies because rocks are not those kinds of beings. So you cannot have something that does not have the capacity for what it is inherently giving rise to that which itself does not possess. It's also called the principle of proportionate causality. Something gives rise to something in proportion to the being that it is.
Yeah, I think I am struggling to follow you, but I'll be honest. But I think this kind of rubs on or touches on the point that maybe philosophy is not the tool we should be using to figure a lot of these things out. Even though we have to, because that's the only way our brains work. We have to figure out some way to define stuff. That doesn't mean that the stuff is made of our definition or our ability to define it. You know what I mean? Like, you're using the tools that we have to say that those tools imply something.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
I don't know.
Well, now listen, I make an assertion and you say, well, it's not that, but it could be something else. That's called a violation of Occam's razor. You're complicating the argument without giving a justification, which is a fallacy.
Is it complicated to say don't know?
Well, to say don't know when I give a compelling argument means that I concede your argument. I just don't want to go your way. In other words, I lose, but I don't want to admit it.
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is there are other options.
Like what? That's what I'm asking.
Well, didn't I just explain it? Like, it could be that the way we think about things and the tools we use to figure them out may have very little to do with the reality itself.
Okay, but again, we cannot. Do you know that I didn't tell you this, but I have Martians sitting under my computer, and they make green cheese sandwiches, and they do it all the time, and they're selling them on Mars. They have a special transponder thing, but the thing is, you can't see them because they're afraid of cameras. If I try to take pictures of them, they're really shy, and you can't ever see them. What would you say to that?
I'd say it's very unlikely.
Okay, well, that's basically what you're doing right now. You're saying, well, it couldn't be this, and it couldn't be that, it couldn't be that. Who knows? Okay, well, that's not engaging the argument. That's basically making a dodge.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, hey, look, I don't care about winning debates. I honestly just want to.
I do because that's how I find certainty. That's how I find answers. We need to. And I'm not saying I have this fetish that I can always win. I want to find what's true, and if I have to be wrong, that's fine. But I enjoy being right because that means I'm going in the right direction. We need that affirmation. Some people always get upset when they say, "Oh, I don't care about winning arguments." Well, I do. And then again, I don't want to be just all by myself.
This is what I'm trying to say, Trey. I recognize that I'm fallible in this. Like, I'm been humbled in life, and I recognize that my best efforts to try to figure things out might not be adequate to figure things out. I mean, I think this is where philosophy, I think, has a problem. Like, maybe it's just me, but I think to say that just because the only way we can figure something out is through these tools where we define stuff and we come up with like logic, right? There's like a universal logic to the universe, the law of non-contradiction and that kind of stuff. I do think it's contradictory if two atoms are in different places. Or what is it? Yeah, two atoms are in
Superposition or no, or dual wave particle duality, that doesn't violate any law of thought.
It doesn't?
We don't understand it. No, there's no violation of if you're going to posit that it creates itself in out of nothing, yes, but that's not what's happening. It's just we just don't understand it. So we need to keep doing more science on it. But
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I'm saying those things that we can demonstrate, then we accept. Now, quantum mechanics, we've got mystery there, still fine. But everything I've asserted so far, I've given a coherent, rational explanation. Usually, what you do in that with every other aspect is you say, okay, it's a law, it's true. We can't disprove it, therefore it's true. But you don't want to do that.
Well, I think that the jury's still out. I guess. I mean, because when you look at, I think particle physics really screws up a lot of this stuff. You know, like
I don't think so, because in order to question the law of non-contradiction, which is what some of the sloppy scientists like Niels Bohr want to do, you commit the fallacy of the principle of explosion. In other words, when you say the law of non-contradiction doesn't hold, then the very opposite of what you just asserted is also true at the same time. Another inquiry is completely gone. There is no inquiry if you doubt the law of non-contradiction, because you got to use the law of non-contradiction in order to doubt the law of non-contradiction. It can't.
I mean, and that's why they're like, well, maybe there's other dimensions where, you know, when they do the
that's committing the violation of parsimony, the principle of parsimony.
Or they're just trying to figure it out, and so that's one of the options. Or like maybe that's it. Yeah, no, and I've thought about this too. Like, indeed, physicists are stumbling over their own faculties, trying to figure out how exactly to make sense of such a thing.
Sure.
So I don't think it's just superfluous to posit multiverse stuff or.
Well, the problem with multiverse is it just compounds the problem infinitely. In other words, they just want to say it's just an infinite set of potentialities that have been actualized. And if that's true, they started out as potentials, then it's nothing. You have something from nothing, and that's ridiculous.
No, it's not.
Something cannot create itself before it exists. That's a violation.
Why does it have to come from something?
If you're saying that it must be and not be at the same time in the same relationship in order to create itself, that's nonsense.
Okay.
You can't create yourself before you exist. By definition, that's what the words mean.
Hold up. Gosh. All right. So yeah, you're a black belt, my friend. Hold up. Let me think.
Oh, good grief. I have thought about this a lot. I'd say that. And I've been doing this about 9 years now with the atheists, and not only have I not lost an argument, I've never had a serious challenge.
I'm impressed.
And it's not new. This is simple medieval thinking. Again, with the Enlightenment, we threw out metaphysics. And if you get back to metaphysics, in fact, that's being recovered right now. And I'm telling you, there's going to be some major changes in the coming decades.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, what's his name? I gotta calm down. What's that guy's name? I forget. He's a cosmologist. He talks about metaphysics.
Like who?
Man.
Most of the science-oriented guys today are woefully ignorant. Even I've debated guys, some of my longtime debate partners.
Sean Carroll.
Oh yeah. Well, the guys that I debate have degrees in philosophy, and they know nothing before the Enlightenment thinkers. Almost nothing. I mean, in their whole 4-year course, and they never learned anything. They just learned cursory understanding of pre-Kantian thought, and it's pathetic. And again, metaphysics, they don't know anything about metaphysics.
Hey,
in science today, everything's about empiricism. It's about epistemology. How do we know?
I totally understand this. Like I understand what you're saying. Like I totally think it's a valid criticism of like Enlightenment, like going too hard towards the epistemological stuff. Like I think that is true. Because my little pet theory about that is we're springing back from a long history of ecclesiastical bullshit. And so we're like, oh, let's just go as far as we can in the other direction. So
that's what the Enlightenment was, because, you had the 30 Years' War and people were sick of the religious infighting. It was very, very ugly. And so you saw a swing, and those who stayed religious, they took to deism. A lot of the founding fathers were deists, but that's what they say. It was an overcorrection. And so now I think we've been like I've been saying since we've got a bird with two wings of metaphysics and epistemology. We've been like a bird flying in a circle with one wing for the past 300 years. And it's time to come out and start thinking again about these things that are that have been, staples of thought up until recent times, really.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree. Okay, when I said Aristotelian philosophy shouldn't be in the dustbin of history, clearly that's glib, because I do get that we need to study the past and what we've come up with and stuff, and it's not.
That's what the Renaissance was. It was a recapturing of the past,
and it's not necessarily a linear thing, where we can say like, oh, we've improved, and so we don't look back at that stuff. Like,
well, no. That's where we're at. We misunderstand technology for wisdom, and that's the problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if it's. I don't want to change the subject, but I'm thinking about the double slit experiment. Seen it?
Yeah.
So you send in. I mean, it even happens on bigger particles too. But let's just go with the light. You send in light. Let's see if I get this. Obviously, I don't know the vernacular very well, but you got the light particle, or it's a photon. You're sending one photon through one of the slits, but you get an interference pattern, kind of like you would with two ripples in the water connecting. So you get this.
Unless you're looking at it. Unless you're measuring it as it does it. Otherwise, it acts like a particle. If it's being watched, it acts like a particle. If it's not being watched, it acts like a wave. I think I got that right. I might have gotten mixed up. It's bizarre. It's almost like they have personhood, and they know when they're being watched, and they change their actions according to how they are, if they're being measured or not.
Yeah.
If you don't measure it and you just let them go through, I can't remember if it's particle.
Well, see, I don't think that's true. And I've heard that from a lot of smart Christians like yourself, that this implies, God playing hide and seek, like, ha ha ha, you think you can measure me, I'm going to like screw with your instruments.
Oh, I don't think it's necessarily God doing it. I think it's something inherent within the particles that we just don't understand. And I agree that God gives us everything that we have, but God works ways in a consistent way, in the way things work, so that we can study.
Except for something like that, like, right? So why is it?
I don't think that it's not the point that we can't understand it. It's just that we don't understand it. And it could be that we never come to a point before Christ's return, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think we need to keep doing science.
I completely agree. So where do we disagree exactly? I mean,
I don't know. You brought it up.
I agree that we need to look at the thoughts of old, bring them back, the ones that are good. We need to not be biased, and just have epistemology as our guiding post. We need to think about metaphysics. I don't deny metaphysics is a valid discipline, and it should be thought about and brought up. I think that cosmologists need to think about it more and work it into their theories, or at least explain why their theories cohere with this or that metaphysical model. So yeah, I don't think we have a disagreement exactly, other than I can come off.
Jesus is Lord.
Except Jesus is Lord. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about that, I mean, like when it comes to the historical reliability of the Bible, we get into that. I don't really want to though.
Well, here's the deal, Michael. I need to get going. I got to put a radiator in my daughter's car today, and I got a little bit of work to do. I'm at work right now.
Good idea. I got to do homework. Thank you.
Okay, and but it's actually been very stimulating and enjoyable talking to you. You've been very kind and very open-minded in your inquiry. Oftentimes, what happens is when I start interacting with people, they'll just start talking over me because they don't want to appear to be not in control of the exchange. And it's just like, can we just talk? And you actually have been like that, and you granted points. You said, hey, that makes sense. And that, I can't tell you how rare that is. And not because I want to get an ego trip or anything, but it's just so nice to talk to somebody who actually I can have a conversation with, and we can actually go back and forth and say, oh, that's a good point, or whatever. So thank you for that. It was very enjoyable. And you're an intelligent guy and very thoughtful. I can tell you kind of wear, I think we may have similar personalities. You just wear your personality in your sleeve. In other words, there's no pretense with you. You're just who you are. And that's kind of how I am as well. And I appreciate that. That's very enjoyable to interact with people like that.
Yeah, Trey, back at you, man. I I feel the same way, man. Appreciate it.
All right. So maybe we can do this in the future if you want to, and continue the conversation if you like, and we can just think about things. And
next time you see me say something glib, just yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, man. All right. You have a great weekend. We'll see you later.
All right, you too, Rose. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. Bye.